So let me just share the screen now. So Rav Stern in the Biurim had quoted from this Aruch HaShulchan, which really is a game changer as far as this halacha is concerned. He says, "Ela dilafi ta'amo b'nimuko ein lanu heter rak ba'ofan sheyizkir." But according to his reasoning, you only have a heter in a situation that he makes mention of. Dahainu b'makom sheyesh minhag barur shederech b'nei adam lahachalifet hamin alayim ha'elyonim, where there's a clear custom that people have no problem exchanging their galoshes. Ve'ein makpidim al hachlafatam, and they don't mind if they swap shoes. The b'shah shahoridis nalo ha'elyon b'prozdar kfar yada shebitzeso alu limtso acherimu mitchilam achalal zeh. Because as soon as the guy took off his galoshes in the outer room, like sort of the antechamber, to get into the main area, he realizes that as he's taking off his galoshes, that someone else may take his pair, and he'll just take the other guy's pair. And he doesn't mind because that's already the minhag. And even if he didn't explicitly think this when he was taking off his galoshes, but certainly, since that's the convention, you don't have to think that perhaps it's usher for me to wear the other guy's galoshes. I have no reason to assume anything other than that. Ach kol ze bistama. But all of this, of course, is where a person did not actually, raise any issues. But if a person, I think I mentioned last time, if a person writes on a piece of tape and takes it to the outside of his galoshes, property of Yankel Schwartz, do not touch, right? Nira devazeh ein lahatir. It seems that you can't give any heter, that even if someone else takes your galoshes, you can take Yankel Schwartz's. V'chamoshem atzinu b'tosfos of perakama de kiddushin, the hagozel af bedavar she'ein makpidim alav pasul le'edus. That Tosfos writes that if a person steals something that people don't mind if it's stolen, you still are considered disqualified from being a witness because you are in some way, in some semblance, a gazlan. The kavanasam da'af bedavar she'ein acher makpidim. And what that means is that normally if there's an item of trifling value that people don't mind normally if you take off of their property. But if you know that this person explicitly, it bothers him, so then you are in a sense a gazlan. Umikoch divrei ha'aruch hashulchan adayin enu smach lahatir echad mischalfu begadav bebeis hamishta o beis haknesus uchedoma. He says, and therefore, just based on the Aruch HaShulchan's heter, we still don't have any heter to be able to use a coat that was left and someone else took my coat. Okay, it's because it's not clear that that's the convention, that whenever you go into a synagogue, you're hanging up your coat with the acknowledgement that if someone takes your coat, you'll just take someone else's coat. That's not the convention. I don't think that anyone would think that. Everyone assumes that when they hang up their coat, they're going to retrieve their coat. But it would still seem to me that we should try to search for some heter to allow a person who has his coat taken and he finds someone else's coat instead in the coat room, to find some heter to allow a person to wear it. And obviously, for obvious reasons, if it's pouring outside or if it's snowing outside, you don't want to get the guy to catch pneumonia because he's scared of abiding by the halacha of not using someone else's coat. So what is a person to do? So he says, before we do this, we really need to establish, and this is I feel that this is a very important exercise, this whole discussion. So let's see what he says. He says, I want us to have two sort of foundational ideas when it comes to borrowing an item that you haven't received explicit permission that you can borrow it. And the first thing is Aleph. Kaimalon be'ilu mitzias di matzah davar sheyesh bo simin l'kulei alma asur lihishtamesh bo. We all know that if you find a lost object and it has a simin, we've learned this halacha together. If an object has an identifying sign on it, you're not allowed to use it. You have to keep it in your house until the owner comes to retrieve it, and you're not allowed to use it for personal use. If, however, it's a type of commodity that is readily available in the marketplace and anyone can get it at any time, so then we've established the halacha previously that all you have to do is do a valuation on the object. So let's say, you might find an article of clothing that belongs to someone and it has a siman, or you might find a book that belongs to someone and it has a siman, right? So if you evaluate it, you clearly are able to determine its value, and you're prepared to pay the person cash for it if it gets damaged through your use, so then you have permission to use it. I see we have a special guest today learning Torah with us, which is very nice. Okay, welcome. Uchemosha Amru the Bava Metzia Chavtes Amar Shmuel Hamotzei Tefillin B'Shuk Sham Demeim U'Manicha La'altar, and it's based on a Gemara. The Gemara says that according to the sage Shmuel, if you find a pair of tefillin in the marketplace, as long as you evaluate its value before you use it, you're allowed to put on the tefillin. The tefillin bar be chavu b'shakach shchichi ayin sham. And the reason that the Gemara gives is because tefillin is readily available to purchase in the marketplace, and therefore, as long as you two special guests, as long as you make sure that you know its value before, such that if it were to get damaged through your use, you would be able to compensate the owner for it, you're allowed to use it. Ulafiza, and based on that premise, yesh lomar the imroa adam shechaber hechlif es kovo bebeis hamedrash or bebeis hamerchatz. Let's say you see a guy. Okay, let's assume for a minute we're in a community where everyone wears a black hat, and people typically, keep their, like in a yeshiva, there's a whole coat room that's filled, from one end to the other with black hats. Okay, so let's say, for example, a guy takes the wrong black hat, okay, in the beis medrash or in the bathhouse, the mikveh, or whatever. Or let's say you left, a guy took your umbrella and left his umbrella accidentally. Now, these are commodities that are readily available in the marketplace. You can buy them anywhere. There's nothing very unusual or unique about these commodities, that it's very difficult to find these things. They're not one-of-a-kind items. So we could argue that this is like a lost object, that as long as you know its value before you utilize it, you say to yourself, you find, someone took your umbrella and you see there's an umbrella left. So you say to yourself, the guy must have taken my umbrella by accident. My umbrella had a little brown button on the handle. This one has a black button on the handle, but it's easy to confuse them. But I know how much I paid for mine. I paid $3.99 for mine plus tax, so at least I know how much it's worth. So therefore, you can take his umbrella and you can use it. So that would be one argument to allow you, when you find the wrong umbrella in the coat room, to be able to take it and use it for yourself. So that's argument number one. Argument number two, he says, Beis, Gam imlo nirtze lismoch al zeh, ayin bebiurim shitas harambam. He says, even though there are some poskim who may not feel comfortable with relying on this, but there's another reason to be lenient, in my humble opinion, he says, and that is see, I lost the place for a second. Okay. Dihine lekaman simin yud aleph sifhei kasuf harav. He says later on in chapter 11, the Rav Shulchan Aruch writes, "Da'af dekaimelan deshol shalom midas havigazlan," that when you borrow something without permission, you borrow someone's item without permission, you are defined as a gazlan. Mikol makom im yadua lo shelo yakpid alav bal hachefetz shari lishtamesh bo. But if you know for a fact that the owner does not mind for people to use this particular item that belongs to him, then you're not a gazlan and you're allowed to use it. Va'afte le'el simin dalet sif dalet heti karav ledina es divrei hatosis but b'mitziach of bezam at aleph. He says, yes, it's true. We did learn before in chapter 4 that the Rav Shulchan Aruch paskins like Tosfos, that you're not allowed to walk into a person's field and start eating their produce without permission. So one might argue that that the same halacha should apply, that to use someone's stuff without their permission should be aser. Af shebarlo. And that's true, says the Rav Shulchan Aruch, even if you know that the owner would be happy for you to partake of the produce that he has in his garden. Like you know that as soon as he finds out that you were in the neighborhood and you stopped by and you picked an apple off his apple tree, he would be happy for you to partake in it. But the Rav Shulchan Aruch still paskins that it's aser because it's not cognizant yeyush. In other words, the person did not have an opportunity to actively relinquish rights to that apple and to give you the rights to eat it. Al karkach tzarach lomar diyesh chiluk ben hishtamshu shel kiloi kimo achilas perosh shezeh aser. But Rav Stern says, but you could still make an important distinction. The important distinction is as follows. In that situation, you're consuming an item that belongs to your friend. You're consuming it, which means that after you use it, it's gone, like eating an apple. But mikol makom masha'en kein hishtamshu shel chayfetz debazeh yesh lahatir. But when you're just using something like an umbrella or a coat or something like that, that we could argue is different. When we know for a fact that the owner will not mind. And even though the owner is not aware that you're using it at the time that you are using it, but since you're using it in such a way where you're not consuming it, but rather making use of it and still retaining the principle, therefore we can be lenient, provided that you are 100% certain that the guy will not mind, right? Ume'ata. So we now have made two arguments. Argument number one is that when you find a lost object, while the halacha is you're not allowed to make use of it for personal use, there are a number of poskim, of medieval poskim, of Rishonim, who opine that as long as it's a readily available commodity in the marketplace, as long as you know its correct retail value when you start using it, then you're allowed to use it for yourself. Argument number two, and the reason you have to know its value is because if it does depreciate in value, while you're using it, you will be obligated to compensate him for the loss in value. Number two, the argument is that later on, we know that you're allowed to borrow something from a friend, even without asking him, provided that you know for 100% with 100% certainty that he doesn't mind for people to use this item, and also provided that you're not consuming it, but rather you're leaving it completely intact, like an article of clothing or a pair of tefillin or something like that. Umeata, heicha sha'adam lokach chayfetz chaveru v'garam lo tsar, kigon shenilkach kova'o. And therefore, okay, you know what? I think we're going to wait for the therefore, Emir Hashem, tomorrow. So let's really mark ourselves that this is where we're up to. So based on these two arguments, it'll come out that when someone takes your object unintentionally, the argument is going to be to allow a person to take that person's object that was left in the coat room and to be able to use it for personal use, even though what we're suggesting now directly contradicts what the Rav Shulchan Aruch paskins in the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So we'll continue, Emir Hashem, this discussion tomorrow. And I hope that you were able to get, even though we're only able to learn for about maybe 17 minutes, I think hopefully that there was still something to gain from this. Okay? So thank you for joining me. And Emir Hashem will pick it up again tomorrow at 6:30. Hi, Kinderlach. Hi, grandchildren. Hi. Nice to see you.